All right, we're back. We're live here on the Talk of the Town, middle of the week, Wednesday, the day before the 4th of July. And we thank you. That's when the live program here is on, but you may be watching the tape version. And either way, we appreciate you being with us and appreciate you tuning in. You've had an opportunity on this show, if you were watching before the break, to get acquainted with as of today, the only candidate for the Commonwealth's attorney for Henry County. Now, the incumbent, who is Joan Ziegler, is going to be running for re-election for the city's Commonwealth's attorney. And one thing that we have in the city that, as of today, we don't have in the county is an opponent. And we're going to have the opportunity to get acquainted with her opponent, and that is Clay Gravely, who's here in the studio with us today. And Clay, thank you for being here. I know I was there at the courthouse when you announced that you were running, and you and I have batted around emails ever since, and it's good to have you on today.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Bill.
For those that don't know, I've got to say right from the start that Clay is a newlywed. Beautiful lady that was there with you, and she was your fiance, and now your wife of about a week and a half, right?
That's about right. I'm a lucky man. Yeah.
So I guess the first question, obviously, is how's married life treating you?
Married life is great. We got back from our honeymoon on Saturday and back to work Monday, but so far so good. We're very happy and having a good time.
Well, for folks that don't know you, give us a little background. Tell us where you're from and how you came to be here doing what you're doing, and give us a little background of yourself.
Sure. Well, I'm a Martinsville native. I was born and raised here. My family has been in Martinsville for some time. They were in the furniture business. Mm-hmm. In the late 80s, when as many people well know, the furniture business wasn't doing too well, and my family moved out of state to Michigan, actually, for a period of time, and I found my way back to Virginia. Went to the University of Virginia for college and Richmond for law school, and eventually decided to move back to Martinsville because that's where I'm from, and that's where I wanted to be. I was tired of being a hostage of the Northern Territory, so I found my way back home, and now I'm practicing law here and happy to be back.
Oh, talking with Andrew earlier, and he was telling us where he went to school and got his bachelor's degree, and then continued on. How about you? You say that you graduated from the School of Law at UVA?
No, I went to law school at the University of Richmond,
okay.
The T.C. Williams School of Law, and I did my undergraduate work at the University of Virginia.
Right. Okay. Well, good enough. And so, when you finished, you took the bar. When you finished the bar, you from there went to where?
Well, I took a nap first of all. That was a grueling experience, and I'm glad I got it on the first swing. But I actually accepted a clerkship with a federal district judge, Judge Jackson Kaiser, who's actually from Martinsville.
Oh, yeah.
He sits in Danville. And that was a year-long clerkship, which I really enjoyed, and it was a great experience, taste of the federal system.
Tell you how old I'm getting. I went to Judge Jackson Kaiser's party when he was named a judge, and that's been a few years ago, hasn't it?
It has.
He was a lawyer.
He's been on the bench for a while, and he's going strong and hearing cases every day, as far as I know. But it was a great experience.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the piano player that he's passed on now, but that we had at the party anyway. It was an outdoor event. It was a real neat thing. But I interrupted you. Go back. You say that you worked for him for a while. And
worked for him for a year. It was a year-long gig. And after that, I thought I wanted to go back to Richmond, where most of my law school classmates were. Practiced law up there, and I was there for about a year and a half, and enough time to disabuse me of the notion that's where I wanted to be, and was given the opportunity in 2007 to move back here and begin practicing law with a local firm, which was a great opportunity, and I did that, and I've been here ever since.
Well, the question that occurs to me right away is, what makes you think you want to be a prosecutor?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is I've been one before. I spent some time as an assistant Commonwealth's attorney in the city's office. So I have experience, real experience as a prosecutor already. That experience certainly, I believe, will help me become an effective chief prosecutor. But first and foremost, that certainly gave me the interest and desire to do the job. Currently, most of the work I do is criminal defense. So I think that I bring a unique perspective to the job. I heard Mr. Nestor beforehand speaking about how a prosecutor has to put on two hats, essentially, a prosecutor hat and a defense hat, to look at the case from both sides. And I think that with my experience, that will come easy to me and will help me be an effective prosecutor.
All right. Again, I can't help but throw out the comparisons here. You're looking at Andrew that wants to be the Commonwealth attorney in Henry County, actually is now, as I learned. And he thinks that everything's going along fine. A few tweaks here or there, but pretty much doing things the way they are. Obviously, if you're making a decision to run against somebody who wants to continue doing what they're doing, you've got some ideas about things you would like to do differently, right?
I would say yes, most definitely.
Share those with us.
Well, I think the first thing I would say, and what I tell most people, is I'm running for Commonwealth's attorney. I'm not here to take anybody's job. I'm not here to necessarily run any kind of negative campaign against anybody. It's a job that I think I would be well suited for. And I believe I bring the skills to the table to do that job well. Fortunately, we have a system where the voters of Martinsville get to decide every 4 years who their elected Commonwealth's attorney is. And this year they're going to have an option. And I think I present a competent, viable option for them, and I think that's good for our system. I think the Republic is strengthened when we have choices in who our elected officials are. So throughout the campaign, I've been speaking with people about my ideas, and I hope to bring an effective, efficient, and fair approach to the office. And I think people will find that I have the skills and experience to do that.
All right. Back to my question. What would you change? What would you do differently?
Well, it's a good question because it's hard to say until you're in that chair exactly what's going to happen. I think the first thing I would do is have a top-down review of the practices and policies of the office. I'd like to see where we can make things more efficient, where we can ensure that the people's tax dollars are being spent well. I think that there needs to probably be closer attention paid to how cases are managed and how they are processed through the system to make sure that we are not getting our dockets clogged up. That costs money, that costs time and effort and judges and staff and things of that nature. So I think a new set of eyes on the job would serve the community well. And to the extent that things could be done better or more efficiently and problems are identified, I intend to tackle them right away.
One of the things, I mentioned this earlier about, I remember Joan having some real issues some time ago. I'm trying to remember how long ago, and I lose track of when it was, about there was just the caseload was just too much for the resources that she had. Do you see that as still being an issue, or would you have a different approach as to how to solve that problem, or to make sure that it doesn't reoccur, or what do you?
Sure. Well, I think in any office, and I manage my own law firm, so it's important to me to make sure that there are efficiencies. If there's things that are slowing us down or making things harder to do, that we fix them. So in the situation which you refer to of Ms. Ziegler having problems managing her docket, it's hard to say what her challenges really were. I'm not in that position, so I don't know the ins and outs of it. But I would say that one solution is to make sure that you have a system in place where the Commonwealth's attorney and their assistants have a clearly defined process for handling cases. I know from working in that office that one of the things that they do is cases that start in lower court will often go to the higher court, the circuit court, but the same prosecutor won't follow the case. They may have their own reasons for doing that, but I know in the county, where Mr. Nestor is now Commonwealth's attorney, usually the prosecutor who starts with a case will carry that case all the way forward to trial or what have you. And I think that's a good example of how you could streamline the handling of these cases, because if you switch prosecutors in the middle of the game, you've got to kind of get up to speed. If you're that second prosecutor, you've got to get up to speed. You don't know the ins and outs of the case from the get-go, and that could, I think, bog things down.
Yeah. You know, again, I was comparing things earlier as, you know, the way they were, say, 30 years ago, the way they are today. And one of the things in the city that I see is different today and has been for, I don't know, a decade probably now, maybe longer, that didn't exist 30 years ago is the public defender's office. And that is a pretty significant office today. How does that change a prosecutor, or does it change a prosecutor's approach to cases with a public defender's office as opposed to a local appointed attorney? Or is there any difference at all?
I don't think there should be a difference, depending on. I don't think a prosecutor should adjust the way they prepare or prosecute their cases just because of who's on the other side. I mean, I think the calculus has to be, what do I need to do to make sure I'm as best prepared I can to prosecute and prove my case. I know all of the public defenders personally. They're all really good attorneys, and they do a lot of criminal. That's all they do, is they do criminal work all the time. So they're some of the best at it that's around. And as far as the court-appointed attorneys are concerned, they're pretty good too. And I do a lot of court-appointed work myself as a defense attorney now. But as a prosecutor, I see no reason, and as an assistant, I certainly didn't adjust how I prepared for my cases, because I knew everybody coming at me was really good at what they did. So I had to be better.
What about, you know, I think about a person who is a prosecutor, defense attorney, and then it's a prosecutor again, switching hats. I mean, do you have to think about the process differently, or is it just the same thing, you just are just on the other side?
Yeah. Well, again, I'll refer back to Mr. Nestor's point. You really do have to wear kind of both hats simultaneously. Now, in practice, a prosecutor does have a lot more steps to take than a defense attorney. A defense attorney essentially is trying to ding the prosecutor on one issue, and if they lose one point, then a lot of the times the case will fall apart in front of their eyes. So a prosecutor has to be very meticulous and very organized and very prepared to make sure every element of the crime is proven beyond a reasonable doubt. So I think the answer to your question is switching back and forth may be a little tricky for some, but if you know the law and you know what needs to be proven, then the preparation is the same.
Let's talk about the criminal element in the city of Martinsville. In the county, they say it's drugs is the number one issue and concern that surrounds the criminal element. Is it the same for the city?
I think that's fair to say. There's no doubt that Martinsville has a drug problem. It ranges everywhere from marijuana, cocaine, to prescription drugs, to the harder drugs, crack. I don't think there's been as much meth in the city as the county has seen, but it's out there. So the issue of drugs is that drugs do lead to other crimes. And I think also in Martinsville, as folks are well aware, with the unemployment as high as it is, and as long as it's been that high, people are really facing tough times. So for one reason or another, they'll turn to drugs. And it also leads to things like theft crimes, violent crimes, domestic crimes. So they're all intertwined, and they all have to be tackled almost simultaneously. But there is a drug problem, and I know that the members of our police department and the investigative units work tirelessly day in, day out to fight it, and their efforts should be applauded.
Yeah, I know that as you were saying, there's so many interrelated instances. I think the retiring police chief, Mike Rogers, we had him on the show here one time. He was talking about, I forget the percentage, but it was way up there, like 80% or something, that the crime was either directly or indirectly related to drugs. You know, if a guy gets charged with theft, he's stealing in order to fund his drug habit. So again, it's an indirect.
That's exactly right. It's all connected.
As a prosecutor, obviously the deterrent is to see that the people who are charged are convicted and then are punished. Do you have any philosophical angle about this approach? Do you go hard on a certain element and easier on another, or what's your approach to it?
Sure. Well, the prosecutor's job is not to make the law, it's to enforce the law. The legislator makes the law, and if the citizens violate the law, then it's up to the prosecutor to see that it's enforced. Now, there's a lot of wiggle room when it comes to how that's done. And as Mr. Nestor mentioned beforehand, it does largely depend on the individual you're dealing with. What was the severity of the crime? Were there victims involved? Was there violence? Was there bodily harm done? Was there property damage? And was this the first time this person had come into contact with the system? You take that all into account in how you approach it. As Commonwealth's attorney, my pledge to the citizens of Martinsville will be to take every case seriously and to ensure that the facts and circumstances of the case guide me in how I prosecute that case. And if someone deserves to be prosecuted, they deserve to go to trial, and that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. I'll ask you the same question I asked Andrew too about plea agreements. I know that that's certainly something that is a part of the process. Do you have any kind of a particular angle on that that is different from your opponent that you could speak to, or how do you feel about the plea agreement?
Sure. Well, I agree. They are what I would consider a necessary evil. I think you'd ask most any prosecutor that has been doing this a while, and they'll tell you it's another tool in the toolbox, and they exist because the fact is that no case is perfect, and often cases are very, very imperfect. And there are going to be times when you have to make a decision. Do you take a bad case to trial and risk a criminal walking free? Or do you say, let's do something to ensure that some sort of punishment is handed down? And I think that's a decision that any competent prosecutor has to make. And usually they have to make it very quickly because things can turn quickly during the course of a case. As far as a contrast with my opponent, I know that in the past she has had strict policies regarding drug cases and other things, and I think that's her prerogative. She was elected to do her job, and she can make that decision. But I think policies for the sake of having a policy is not necessarily the right approach. I think you have to make sure that you leave yourself the ability to make sure that your cases are handled effectively. And if you have to make a decision between taking a bad case to trial and or stopping short and making sure that someone gets some sort of punishment, then you can't hamstring yourself by just taking it off the table at the get-go.
Yeah. I can't help but remember the case of the fella who years and years ago had been charged with possession of marijuana or something, and fled, and didn't go to court, and lived an upstanding life, and was I forget how many years had passed, and was brought back here by your opponent to stand trial for. Would you have done anything differently with that? Would you have had a different feeling about that?
Well, Bill, I'll be honest, I don't know the details of that case, and it's hard to say what I would have done unless I were standing in those shoes. If someone had committed a crime in the city of Martinsville and left and had somehow been brought back, that crime was still committed. I think the job of the prosecutor regardless of whether or not they left and came back, or whether they weren't caught for a week or a month or a year, doesn't change the fact that a crime was committed. So you have to approach it from the standpoint that you have a job to do, and if that's what happened, then you have to prosecute it.
Well, just for the record today, if a person in the city of Martinsville is caught by police with possessing, say, marijuana, what is the criminal offense for that? What happens?
Well, in the state of Virginia, possession of marijuana is what's called a Class 1 misdemeanor. It carries up to 12 months in prison and a $2,500 fine. That's the law in Virginia. The legislature's made it that way, and until they change it, that's what it'll be. So if anybody is caught with marijuana, then they can, and I should qualify that up to a certain amount, and after a certain amount it becomes a felony. I think it's up to 5 ounces now. But simple possession of marijuana is a Class 1 misdemeanor. It carries the risk of jail time. There is in place a process called a first offender program, where if you are charged and it's your first time with such an offense, there's the opportunity to do things like community service and going into a drug treatment program, after which, if you successfully complete it, the charge is essentially dismissed. But it's by no means a light crime.
Yeah.
It's very serious.
All right, talk about light crimes here. Now, this is serious too, but I'm just wondering, we've been talking on the coffee break about this. As of July the 1st, which was Monday, we got the new texting law. Now, I don't know how many cases are going to come from the city police officers charging people with texting, but some are going to happen.
Sure.
Now, I have wondered, this is just, I just want to kick it around here with you here. If a person is dialing the phone number on their cell phone, that's not texting. So if the officer charges them, how does a prosecutor deal with that if their defense is, Your Honor, I was dialing the phone?
Well, Bill, that question is going to have a lot of answers to it as we see this unfold. I've actually been reading and following the news on this texting law, and you correctly point out in the law itself, it actually differentiates between what's legal and what's not. And the texting of letters and messages is illegal, but the text or the dialing of numbers, or even I think it was loading a GPS is acceptable.
That's accepted.
So the challenge for the men and women on the front lines who are trying to enforce this, if they see someone looking down at their phone, the challenge is going to be, how do you prove that what they were doing was legal or illegal? It's going to be it's interesting to see how it unfolds. I don't know how that's going to happen, but it's going to be challenging. I can assure you.
Well, good enough. Well, listen, Clay, I want to tell you that I got a dog not long after you declared that you were running, and so I'm walking about 3 or 4 miles every day, and I see more Clay signs out here than anything or anybody else. Not just you've got the signs out there. And in fact, there's one of the streets that I walk on, I noticed there at there's a mailbox and it says Gravelly. And then there's a Clay Gravelly sign there too. So I don't know if that's any relation or not, but there are a lot of Gravellys here.
That's for sure, and I think most of my family are supporting me, so there's a good chance that they are family members, and I'm very humbled and appreciative of all the support we've received. I've got a lot of good people out there who believe that I will make a effective prosecutor, and I do appreciate all their support and hope I can gain more through the coming months.
Oh, good enough. We're out of time. We do want to thank you and wish you the best luck and appreciate you coming on and being with us.
Thank you, Bill.
This evening.
I would add, if people want to visit my website at claygravelly.com, I'd encourage them to do so. It gives a nice rundown of what our campaign's about and what we'll be talking about over the next few months.
Oh, good enough. Well, close things out, I would like to give you an opportunity, if you would, to look at the camera and take a little bit of time and ask the voters of the city of Martinsville to vote for you come November.
Thank you, Bill. And as I said, please visit my website to learn more about our campaign. I'm running for Commonwealth's attorney because I'm from Martinsville and I intend to live here, and I want this to be a safe and desirable place to live, work, and raise a family. I've served as both a prosecutor and a defense attorney. I've seen it from both sides. I think I bring a unique perspective on the administration of justice, and I think that with those tools I will make an effective and efficient prosecutor on day one. I hope that you will consider voting for me in November, and I do appreciate your support. Thank you.
Again, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Bill.
Appreciate you coming. All right, folks, stay with us. We'll take a brief break and we'll come back. And I've got just a few closing comments here as we wrap things up and wind things down on this edition of the Talk of the Town. We'll be right back right after this.